Greetings from the homestead. I'm Volkmom, and I'm sitting in the garden next to this beautiful comfrey plant with the Blonde Buttermaker.
Thanks, I'm so happy to be here. This is the Blonde Buttermaker. Can you describe a little bit what the comfrey looks like?
Well, it's a gorgeous, stately, and stoic plant in the garden. It has tall, strong stems that are coarse and kind of hairy, slightly prickly, and it has these beautiful curved kind of bell-shaped stems just dripping with purple flowers, and it's literally kind of glistening in this late afternoon, early evening sunlight.
Yeah, it's so beautiful, and one thing I've noticed about the flowers, have you heard of the logarithmic phenomenon, the golden ratio? The flowers kind of come out as the golden spiral. It's such a perfect example of that in nature.
Wow, that's amazing. I've never really noticed that before.
So one thing actually I was wondering about that I don't know much about is the medicinal uses of comfrey. I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, okay. Well, we have used it medicinally over the years. Of course, the Latin name is Symphytum officinale. There are different types of symphytums, but this tends to be the most common one. The common name, of course, is comfrey, and also knit bone, because it actually can help knit bones. It's an ancient European folk remedy, and it's in the borage family. It possesses the substance allantoin, which proliferates cell growth. And this herb is especially useful for healing cuts because it binds flesh back together. Because of this very strong action, one must be very careful that the wound or cut is a clean one, because if it's misused to mend a dirty cut or injury, it could actually block in infection.
Wow.
Something to be aware of. So knitbone or comfrey is said to be so useful at healing broken bones that it should actually only be used after the bones have been set, because you don't want it to mend the bones in the wrong position.
Right.
Yeah, so mainly our personal experience with using comfrey for medicine has been in the form of a salve or a balm. The roots and the leaves are harvested and then freshly dried. And then we make an oil by infusing those dried leaves and roots in some olive oil in a tightly sealed glass jar. And we leave that glass jar in the sun for like a minimum of 2 weeks, and we shake it at least every day as often as we can. And it's kind of neat because you might think that the oil would go rancid being in the sun, but something happens where, because the herb is in the oil, it doesn't go rancid. So it makes this amazing medicinal oil. You can use that as it is to heal cuts or small wounds that are clean, bruises. You can use it on your broken bones. So if you want to take it the further step with your oil and make it into a balm or salve, I just use like a ratio of about 1 to 3. So like 1 part grated beeswax kind of melted into the oil, and you just warm it on a low heat and then let it set, and then you have a nice balm or salve. So you can use it as is with the oil or take it the next step to the salve. But yeah, as a mother living on this farm, somebody's always getting cuts and scrapes and bruises from just playing hard outside and working hard outside.
Exactly.
And the comfrey salve, just every single time, it just heals up those cuts so quickly. And it's also really great for calluses and cracked skin from hard-working hands. Comfrey tea was a traditional nourishing beverage for our European folk, but it should just be drank sparingly, and I always encourage listeners to do their own research and get the Latin name correct with that Symphytum officinale. Do your own research before taking any herbs internally, but it can be a nourishing beverage if used occasionally. Also, livestock are pretty big fans of comfrey. Sheep, goats, I've heard cows, chickens love it. You can feed it to them and it makes an excellent fodder. How do you use it at your place?
Yeah, thank you so much for answering how you use it medicinally, because my knowledge of comfrey is limited to the way we use it in our garden, more like a tool. Comfrey is used in our gardens as a fertility program that supports our end goal. It takes the place of a fertilizer, tilling, weed control, and fencing for windbreak. So it really does so much. Just this one plant is like the key to our garden. And since we live up on a hill with little established vegetation, and all of our ash trees are dying or have died, so it's very useful as a windbreak. It can get so tall and quite large leaves, so the comfrey can help reduce frost and gives us a longer growing season, which is great, especially where we live. And also we use comfrey for its organic matter. So how we want to do this correctly is 1 to 2 weeks after blooming and 2 days before the full moon, we cut the vegetation down for a fertilizer. And also it acts to block weeds, so we can use it for mulching. And you want it to be at least 2 inches thick to be effective. And mulching in this way is also great for watering because it increases the capacity of water in your soil, so it holds more moisture in between rains.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. That makes so much sense. What do you think about, like, as far as the windbreak? How does that work exactly? Like, I've noticed that some of the comfrey plants in our garden are, you know, they're about 2 feet tall, but you said that maybe some of the ones on your farm get taller. So
Yes.
Can you talk about that?
We actually have one next to our little peach tree, and this year it got all the way up to my husband's chest, and he's a pretty tall guy. It's definitely over the height of my kids and almost as tall as me, and we'd love to just marvel at it. And then we just recently cut it down near the full moon to mulch around our peach tree. So all of our new trees have a little companion of comfrey next to it, just waiting to help nourish the trees growing.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So does comfrey, how does it like nourish the plants when you mulch it? When you mulch the plants with the comfrey, how does that work exactly? Like, how is that different than mulching with, say, like grass clippings or something like that?
Yeah, comfrey it has deep roots, so it brings up minerals and nutrients from the soil that shallower root plants can't access. And then so when we mulch with it goes back into the earth, and actually it has like quite the smell while it's decomposing around the plants. And you can also make comfrey tea, where you cut down the leaves and you leave it to kind of like stew or ferment in a big bucket of water, which you want to like leave not next to your door, because we had it next to our door, and then every time a breeze came we would like, what is that smell? Oh, it's just the comfrey tea. I think that you could also take that and nourish your houseplants with it, which is something I really need to do. So it's really great as a fertilizer. We love it. And actually, you know, another thing I wanted to talk about was we had one little plant, and it's just been struggling and struggling. So we've been putting the comfrey around it, and probably a week after we laid the comfrey mulch, it perked up, and its leaves were green, and it looked like it was so much happier. So we were so thankful for that.
That's really neat. Like its own kind nourished it.
Yes.
Gave it what it needed.
Its little buddy helped it out.
Yeah, it's amazing, like using comfrey as a green mulch, because you see this glorious plant. You know, it's like you said, cut it 2 weeks after blooming, and then you want to cut it down around the full moon if you can coincide those two things. And you can actually do it twice a year. It pops up really quick and gets right back to growing as soon as you chop it down. Yeah, it's amazing. I find it to be inspiring, especially for our folk and what we're going through right now. It's like with this comfrey plant, you know, you can come and just completely, you can take from it, and it gives and gives and gives, and it might look like nothing is left, and you might feel like, oh my gosh, it's gone, I've done it, I've killed the comfrey. But guess what? No, because it has its roots. Its roots are strong and they're deep, and as long as it's got its roots, it's going to come right back up again and look more glorious and rebloom than it ever did before.
Yeah, that's definitely a great comparison, and I hope that's very inspiring for sure.
Yeah. Well, I've really enjoyed sitting in the garden and chatting with you about Comfrey today.
Yeah, it's so great that we were sitting here next to the Comfrey so we can kind of describe it to our listeners, and we can kind of view the we love it for actually the bumblebees, and the honeybees just love it. And my daughter she'll go out to the garden and just sit and watch the little bumblebees going in and out of each flower. I got a few pictures of that, and it's so charming.
Sweet. Yeah, there's a big bumblebee right now just buzzing around. His little legs are loaded with pollen, and he's having a good day.
Yeah, in the spring, when I'm sitting next to a comfrey plant, it seems like the comfrey is just vibrating, buzzing, and it's because of all the bees.
Yeah, there's definitely a reason that our European ancestors brought this herb intentionally to the United States, because it's a sacred, ancient plant, and it's something that all of our folks should get to know.
It's definitely really, really special for us. So thank you so much for having me to talk about comfrey.
My pleasure. It's been really lovely. Thank you so much for listening and joining us on the homestead today. We really hope you enjoyed this segment.
And if you want to learn more about the Blonde Buttermaker, you can find my videos on the Red Ice YouTube channel or on my personal YouTube channel, The Blonde Buttermaker. I make short how-to videos on traditional foods, health, and other related topics. It is my passionate goal to inspire men, women, and families to reawaken that ancestral knowledge for vitality and health so that we are able to fight for our culture.